Hello everyone, and welcome into another episode of Tales from the Vault, where we will be doing tales from local history, childhood memories, true crime, paranormal, and legends. So sit back and let's enjoy this episode. Hey everybody, guess what? Today is Halloween and we are going to be doing some creepy and unsolved disappearances for our Tales from the Vault. These are things that I have researched over the past week or so, and these are ones that I have come up with. So, without further ado, let's get into these. Disappearance of Gary Mathias. A man named Gary Mathias disappeared with his 4 friends after attending a college basketball game and was never seen again. His 4 friends were found decaying in around a remote cabin 20 miles away from their car, having passed from starvation and hypothermia, despite there being ample supply of food and heating materials. The disappearance of Glenn and Bessie Hyde. In the late 1920s, a newlywed couple named Glenn and Bessie Hyde attempted to kayak the rapids of the Grand Canyon, but disappeared without a trace. Their kayak was found with most of their equipment still inside it, but the trail quickly went cold. 50 years later, a kayaking guide was taking a group of tourists down the Colorado River and told them about the disappearance of the Hydes. An older woman in the group chimed in, claiming to be Bessie, and describing in detail how Glenn had been violent, and she took his life. But she later recounted her story. A couple of decades later, another woman known for rafting the Grand Canyon passed away, and her friends found the Hayes marriage certificate among her belongings, leading to speculation that she may have been Bessie under another name. Despite these stories and speculation, the case remains unsolved. Disappearance of Kelly Disney. In 1984, a girl named Kelly Disney went missing after fighting with her boyfriend at a party. 2 officers were among the last people to see her, and she told them she was walking to a friend's house. Her family searched for her, but the cops deemed her a runaway. So the case went cold. 10 years later, someone found a skull in a car at the reservoir where people went to party. It was confirmed to be Kelly Disney's skull, and there were signs of trauma, but there was no further progress. Some people believe the assailant was her boyfriend. Other people think there may have been a serial unaliver in the area, as 4 more girls went missing after Kelly. All of them went missing while walking at night. The disappearance of Beatrice Wink. In 2012, while the elderly Wink couple was visiting the town of Aparecida do Norte in Brazil as tourists, later 77-year-old Beatrice Wink stepped outside and waited while her husband, Delmar Wink, waited in line to pay. When he left the store, she had vanished. Investigations of her disappearance led nowhere, as they did not find a single clue as to what happened to her. Her husband is still alive, and his adult children keep searching for her. The town is known for the sanctuary of Aparecida, which is the 2nd largest Catholic church in the world, and she disappeared right in front of it. The church only gave the police access to its cameras 15 days after her disappearance, by which time that day's events were recorded over. Disappearance of the Beaumont children. In 1966, 3 Beaumont children disappeared from a beach in Australia. They were kidnapped at the same time in a busy public place with very little conclusive evidence about what had happened. As the case started picking up heat in the media, there were a lot of weird complications, possible sightings, hoaxes, ransom notes, calls, etc., and potential connections to other kidnappings and unalivings. They were never found. Interestingly, it is widely considered to be a big turning point for attitudes toward children in Australia. After the Beaumont siblings disappeared, people were much less willing to let their children out unsupervised, though of course it wasn't the first time a child had been kidnapped by a presumed stranger. Passing of David Glenn Lewis. David Glenn Lewis disappeared on Super Bowl Sunday in Amarillo, Texas in 1993 with a freshly made sandwich in the fridge and a VCR set up to record the game. His wife and daughter returned home from a trip a few days later to find him gone, but his watch and wedding ring were still in the house. He was a lawyer and had previously expressed fear to his wife and his children that his life was in danger. His car was found at the courthouse in Amarillo 4 days later. He was the victim of a hit and run as he was walking on the side of the highway in Moxie, Washington. It took over 10 years to identify his body, and no one knows how he got there or why he was in Washington. The Polaroid in the parking lot. In April 1988, a 9-year-old Michael Henley vanished while on a camping trip with his father in the Zuni Mountains of New Mexico. In September of the same year, 19-year-old Tara Calico disappeared from her hometown of Belen, New Mexico, while out on her bike. On June 1989, a woman goes into a convenience store and notices a white van in the parking lot. When she exits, she sees a Polaroid photo face down on the ground where the van had been. It showed a teenage girl and a young boy bound and gagged. They were initially identified to be Michael Henley and Tara Calico. Henley's remains were eventually found. Tara Calico's case, however, remained unsolved. Forensics later determined that the boy in the photo wasn't Michael, and that Michael had passed due to hypothermia after getting lost in the woods. The boy in the photo with Tara remains unidentified. The disappearance of Jason Julkowski. Jason Julkowski was a 19-year-old from Omaha, Nebraska, who disappeared without a trace on June 2001 on his way to work. What baffled investigators was how quickly it happened. He was called into work at a fast food restaurant for an unplanned shift, took a shower, started walking to a high school a few blocks away to meet a co-worker who offered him a ride, and just vanished somewhere on that walk. His family said he is too responsible to have left without any warning, and he was not having any problems at the time of his disappearance. He was described as a shy person who was not involved with any illicit substances or spirits and was very close to his family at the time of his disappearance. The disappearance of Lars Mittank. In 2014, a German man named Lars Mittank went on vacation to Bulgaria with friends. While there, Lars was injured in a fight he got into and therefore wasn't able to fly back home with his friends for health reasons. He later called his mother. They all had left, saying he thought he was being followed and he was going to book a flight the next day. He was last seen on CCTV footage heading to the airport, carrying his suitcase, and later he was seen running out of the airport at full speed without his bags. He scaled a fence, ran into the woods, and was never seen again. The disappearance of Sneha Phillip. Sneha Ann Phillip was an Indian-American physician who was last seen a day before the 9/11 attacks by a department store surveillance camera near her lower Manhattan apartment. There had been a lot of theories behind her disappearance over the years, as no promising leads or evidence of her fate have ever developed. Foul play or leaving her family were possibilities over the years, but it was assumed by her family that she passed trying to help the victims of 9/11 as she was a doctor and lived just 2 blocks from the World Trade Center. The disappearance of Eileen Moore Lighthouse. In 1900s, 3 lighthouse keepers mysteriously disappeared from the lighthouse of Eileen Moore, an island north of Scotland. The door of the lighthouse was unlocked, coats were missing, and half-eaten food was left. The last entries on the log described a storm on December the 12th with severe winds, but all of the reports in the area stated the weather was clear that day. A prevailing hypothesis is that there was very rough weather, and they were swept out to sea while trying to secure some equipment. The disappearance of Charles Rogers. Charles Rogers was an American seismologist, U.S. Navy pilot, and unaliver suspect who went missing in June 1965 after police discovered his elderly parents' mutilated remains in the refrigerator of the Houston home the three shared. On all the shelves and in all the freezer compartments were the dismembered bodies of his parents, body parts in unwrapped, washed off pieces smaller than individual joints. There was little food in the house. The house had been carefully cleaned, and only body fluid discovered was on the keyhole of a bedroom door. The bedroom belonged to the couple's 43-year-old son, Charles Rogers. 9 years before these events, Charles inexplicably quit his job as a seismologist with Shell without explanation and moved in with his parents. He turned into a loner and recluse, living in the attic bedroom. He only communicated with his parents by notes, slipped under the bedroom door, and was rarely seen by neighbors. Despite a nationwide manhunt, he was never seen or heard from again. The disappearance of Brandon Lawson. In August 2013, a man named Brandon Lawson ran out of gas on a Texas highway in the middle of the night and called his brother to come help him. Shortly after, he called 911 and reported that someone was chasing him to the woods and that he needed the police. Eventually, his brother and the police officer arrived at the scene to find his truck abandoned, but not a sign of Brandon. Brandon called his brother one last time to say he was hurt and is 10 minutes away from his truck. That was the last time anyone had heard from Brandon, and searches of the area turned up nothing. In February 2022, a search party successfully located Lawson's clothing near his last known location, and the Texas Rangers also found human remains. On further search, DNA tests were run, but are still pending. The Jamison family demise. The Jamison family, 2 adults and 1 young daughter, was interested in purchasing a plot of land in Oklahoma. In 2009, they drove out to the plot in their pickup truck to check it out. Their truck was later found abandoned with $32,000 cash found inside the truck, along with their IDs, wallets, cell phones, and GPS. The family dog was also left inside the truck and was extremely malnourished. A camera was also discovered, and the final picture to be photographed was of their 6-year-old daughter, Madison, who looked distressed in the photo. Years later, in 2013, the skeletal remains of 2 adults and a child were discovered not far from where their truck was abandoned. They were later identified to be the Jamisons. They were found lying side by side in the woods with no signs of any struggle. The disappearance of Susan Powell. Josh and Susan Powell had 2 young sons and were going through a bad marriage. Josh was violent and controlling, and at one point they had to move because Josh's father, Steve, developed an obsessive infatuation with Susan. Things got so bad, she started fearing for her life. Then one night, in 2009, the whole family disappeared, only to have the husband come back a few days later saying that he and the boys went camping and he had no idea where his wife was. As the investigation into what happened to his wife continued, Josh started acting more and more suspiciously, eventually moving back in with his father. He then lost custody of his sons after his father, Steve, was caught with child, along with hundreds of creepy photos of Susan. Finally, during a supervised visit, Josh grabbed his son from the social worker, holed himself up inside his house, and blew it up, unaliving himself and both sons. All the while, Susan's whereabouts remain unsolved, and she is still listed as missing. The unaliving of Dorothy Jane Scott. Dorothy Jane Scott was a young divorced mom who worked at a head shop and sold hippie items. In 1980, she disappeared from a hospital parking lot after taking one of her other co-workers to the hospital due to a spider bite. When her co-workers came out of the hospital, they saw Dorothy's car speeding towards them. She didn't stop, and that was the last time anyone saw her. The next day, her car was found torched, but she was nowhere to be found. Over the next few years, her parents started receiving harassing phone calls. The caller asked if Dorothy was home and claimed to know where she was. 4 years later, her charred remains were found next to a highway, buried beneath a dog, possibly because the assailant thought that it would fool cadaver dogs that it happened to hit on that spot. The disappearance of Angela Hammond. In 1991, a 20-year-old Angela Hammond, who was then 4 months pregnant, stopped at a phone booth while driving home to call her fiancé, Rob. She described to him a creepy-looking man in a pickup truck in the parking lot. Her fiancé suddenly heard Angela scream. He ran to his car and drove down the road to the payphone, which was only a few minutes away. As he raced down the road, Rob spotted a pickup truck matching Angela's description going in the opposite direction. He noticed a man driving and saw what appeared to be Angela in the passenger seat. After attempting a pursuit, the transmission on his truck gave out, and that was the last time she was ever seen. The disappearance of Rico Harris. Rico Harris was a massive 6'9" former Harlem Globetrotter basketball player who had illicit substance issues earlier in his life, but had made a full recovery and was getting his life back on track. He was driving along California's Interstate I-5 from his home in Southern California to Seattle to live with his girlfriend. He was somewhere just north of Sacramento, exhausted, and told his girlfriend over the phone that he wanted to check out the mountains, and calls stopped. Since then, his car was found a couple of days later by a patrolman near a rest stop in the mountains. A massive search was launched, but there was no signs of him. A week later, a driver later reported seeing a massive 6'9" individual wandering down the highway. A search was relaunched, and massive size 17 footprints were found on the grounds, which were not there before. In 1912, Bobby Dunbar's parents took him fishing on a lake in Louisiana, and he went missing. Police searched for him for 8 months and finally found a man named William Cantwell Walters, who was traveling with a boy that resembled Bobby Dunbar. Walters claimed the boy was the son of a friend who had given him custody, and that the boy's name was Bruce Anderson, not Bobby Dunbar. Investigators and positive ID from the parents determined that this was Bobby and gave custody to his parents. The town had a parade for Bobby's return. During the trial with Dunbar and Walters, a woman named Julia Anderson came forward to defend Walters, asserting this was her son Bruce and she had given Walters custody. The courts dismissed her because she had 3 children out of wedlock and 2 were already deceased. The trial was being held in Mississippi, and her being a very poor woman from North Carolina, she gave up on fighting the case. In 2008, one of Bobby Dunbar's granddaughters had a DNA test done. She compared her grandfather's DNA to his brother's. They were not related. The disappearance of Sherry Papini. Sherry Papini disappeared on November the 2nd, 2016, while out jogging a mile from her home in Redding, California. She was 34 years old at the time. She reappeared 3 weeks later on Thanksgiving Day, November the 24th, with a brand on her shoulder and a horrifying tale. She claimed 2 women had abducted her while brandishing firearms and held her captive. She was then freed by her captors at 4:30 that morning, still wearing restraints on the side of a county road near the interstate in Yolo County, about 150 miles south of where she disappeared. The case garnered media attention. Law enforcement experts cited doubts as to the validity of her story because of the unlikely details and inconsistencies of the reported abduction, including the presence of unknown male DNA on her clothing. 7 years after the incident, police revealed they matched the DNA to Papini's ex-boyfriend, who offered quite a tale of his own. She had reportedly been staying with her ex-boyfriend, James Reyes, during the time she was missing. According to Reyes, she asked that he harm her in order to give her story validity. On August 2020, she stood by her story when a federal agent and a detective from Shasta County Sheriff's Office questioned her. She received more than $30,000 from the California Victim Compensation Board between 2017 and 2021. On March 3, 2022, Papini was arrested on federal charges stemming from her fabrication of the abduction. 6 weeks after her arrest, Papini signed a plea deal admitting that she had orchestrated the hoax. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of mail fraud and to 1 count of making false statements. In September 2022, she was sentenced to 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release, and ordered to pay $309,902, including restitution to cover the cost of the police investigation. At the time of her abduction, she was married to Keith Papini. In October 2009, they had 2 children together, a boy and a girl. On the day she was arrested on federal charges, the couple separated. In April 2022, her husband filed for divorce from Sherry and for sole custody of their children. On the day after her disappearance, her husband Keith returned from work to find her not at home. He eventually found her cell phone and her earbuds at the intersection a mile away. She claimed the woman kept their faces hidden from her by wearing masks or keeping Papini's head covered. She was branded on her right shoulder during her purported captivity with the word Exodus. She reported she was physically assaulted, had her nose broken, her hair cut off, and weighed 87 pounds when she was released. Papini was released from prison in August 2023 and placed in a halfway house. In a 2025 interview, Papini admitted difficulty in finding a job due to media attention. So, there are creepy and unsolved disappearances to enjoy on this Halloween. I hope you enjoyed them. Don't forget to comment down below, like, subscribe, and hit that notification button. And I will see you guys the next time. Bye.